What is glamour photography? This style of photography transcends literal explanation. In other words, if a person thinks a photograph is beautiful, they don't need to realize why. Rather, they must feel that it is beautiful. Glamour is an intangible, mysterious element. Glamour is a state of mind. Glamour doesn't mean only nudes or boudoir pictures. The definition can apply to almost any style photograph. Men, women, exotic locations, even buildings or advertising photography. Photography emulates life. There are glamorous elements all around us. A trained eye can capture an instant, a moment, when the turn of the head, a brush of the hair, or the glint of a smile is just so. This instant could reveal the true inner spirit of a person, a window that allows the observer an insight into what makes the person who they are. That's glamour. For years, Hollywood publicity photos have portrayed glamorous images. The most beautiful places in the world often seem glamorous. Paris, Venice, Tokyo, Rio. Certainly a Van Gogh is glamorous. Even Michelangelo's pieces can be portrayed as glamorous. Once again, glamour is a perception, a feeling, a state of mind. You may be thinking to yourself, well, how do I photograph a mere essence, an attitude? Well, let's find out. Before we tackle the techniques and lessons of glamour photography, let's talk about its history. The earliest origins of glamour photography were actually nudes dating back to about 1865. These photos were known as French postcards. These postcards began to surface for those who could not afford a painting of a nude or semi-draped woman. Soon people realized that these photographs were very real. These underground pictures garnered a public outcry. The incensed critics declared that absolute nudity was a severe exploitation of women. Those photographing and distributing such material were brought into court and prosecuted. As we all know, similar debates still ring throughout the courts today. The period of time between the two world wars saw the most decided advances in the world of photography. After the wars, more photographers began to use the technology as an art, no longer only as a means of communications. This led to a much more diverse range of photographic imagery. The traditional glamour or nude photo, set in soft focus and a tranquil setting, gave way to more powerful images that concentrated on design. Oftentimes, these new visions were developed by eager newcomers to the art of glamour photography, or to the more adventurous, tried-and-true photographer looking for a new challenge. As technology continued to advance, the ability for the amateurs to control their own photo images began to become a reality. The popularity of the medium spawned photo clubs in nearly every neighborhood. Compared to other forms of photography, the amount of equipment needed for successful glamour photography is relatively small. Of course, the mainstay of any equipment bag will be the camera. Usually this will be a 35mm SLR, the single lens reflex camera. It's easily the most widely used camera by pros and beginners alike, so it'll probably be your camera of choice as well. But keep in mind, if you're destined to work as a professional photographer, you should consider the other larger format cameras as well. The medium format camera that I prefer is the Pentax 645. This camera gives me an image that's almost 2 times larger than that of the 35mm cameras, while not weighing nearly as much as the 6x6 or 6.7 cameras. The size, weight, and shape of the 645 allows me to use the system much the same way as I use my 35mm setup. Remember, the ultimate end use of your photograph will determine your format. Say, for instance, your area of expertise was outdoor advertising billboards. Then you'd be working with a 4x5 or larger type camera. Also keep in mind that the vast majority of glamour work is shot on 6:4:5 or 6x6 or larger formats for reproduction in magazine packaging or posters and cards. Now back to the bag. Since oftentimes the tone of glamour photography is dramatic, evaluating the lighting design is critical. For this reason, we suggest that you carry a Polaroid camera in your kit as well. When you've completed your lighting setup, you can snap a shot with the instant camera just to make sure that the direction, intensity, and ratios of light are what you're looking for. As we've mentioned before, we're assuming you have a good working knowledge of photography. So in this section, I'd like to focus our attention on lens selection, film stock, and lighting options. For glamour photography, the most useful lens when working within the 35mm formats are 35mm, 85mm, 135mm, and the 80 to 200mm zoom lens. But each person's needs are different, so don't stop experimenting with other lenses. You may discover a focal length better suited for your style of picture taking. As you may know, most 35mm cameras are sold with 50 or 55mm lenses. These lenses most closely approximate the angle of view of the human eye, right about 46 degrees. However, this focal length of lens tends to be too normal. Because of this, it is less useful for glamour photography. It neither has a wide enough angle of view to set the model in the locale, nor does it allow the photographer the ability to isolate the model, separate them from the surroundings. I'd like to explain the relative differences between the suggested lenses. This will help you determine, given your particular shooting circumstances, which lens would be the best choice for your setup. The 35mm lens with its 62-degree angle of view is indispensable for indoor photography, especially when working in small, confined spaces. Because the angle of view is just moderately wide, it offers less distortion than the true wide-angle lenses and is ideal when you need to include a large portion of the setting in your shot. The 85mm lens is ideal for any glamour or portraiture photography. Where a wide-angle lens exaggerates perspective, increasing the apparent difference in size between near and far objects, the 85mm lens compresses it. This makes the lens particularly flattering by producing very natural images. The 135mm is a slightly longer lens that is ideally suited for situations where you need to get a lot of separation between the subject and the background. Thus, this lens has a fairly large aperture plus a limited depth of field. Another distinct advantage when you're working with a long lens is its ability to work at a distance from the subject. This is perfect when you're trying to create candid, spontaneous shots. Now let's talk about the zoom lens. The modern zoom lenses are often preferred to conventional fixed lenses because the versatility allows you a number of ways to treat the same subject without changing your position or the lens. For instance, you can shoot an image of your model's face on one frame, then zoom out for a full body shot in the next. On the surface, the zoom lens sounds ideal. However, there are some sizable drawbacks, like smaller maximum apertures because of the number of lens elements. The zoom lens also requires more light to create acceptable images. This can also create more pronounced lens flares. Also, a zoom lens can't focus as clearly as fixed focus lenses. That's an important consideration in certain types of glamour photography. Well, now you have your camera, Polaroid, and assorted lenses. How about film? Let's assume you'll be shooting color stock. Color films fall in two categories, reversal and negative. Because it produces very small grain in properly exposed images, professional photographers tend to use reversal films. Typically, the film of choice is Kodachrome 25. Of course, Kodak seems to have the biggest name recognition, but Fuji is also another exceptionally high-quality film. They also have a line of low-grain reversal film stock. These transparency films are often stipulated by magazines because of the true clean image quality. And unlike most other films, they have little or no grain. So therefore, these slides can be blown up to full-page magazine format with no appreciable loss of quality. The lack of grain in Kodachrome and Fujichrome stock is important because any grain pattern would clash with the dot pattern created in the printing process of magazines, posters, billboards, in fact anything that goes to the print shop. What you'll get when using low-grain film is a sharper, crisper, more color-saturated image than with any other emulsion. Kodachrome and Fujichrome come rated at 25, 50, 64, and 125 ASA ISO. There'll be times when you have assignments that will dictate the speed and type of film you use. Just remember, films are rated to be used within specific lighting parameters and have recommended color temperatures. Correct judgment in film selection is vital because reversal films have limited exposure latitude. That means there will be little or sometimes no compensation for exposure or color balance mistakes in the processing stage. Once again, each shooting situation will be different. There are many values to consider when determining the needs for a specific shoot in color and black and white. I want to show you some very important elements that you should always carry with you. First, never be without a complete complement of reflectors. In most cases, a white, silver, and black reflector will be more than adequate. Let's see how these different materials enhance and help you manipulate natural or studio lighting conditions. If you find yourself in a situation where your subject is under less than ideal lighting conditions, there are a few tricks that will help you pull off a tough shot. When your model is in a severe backlit situation where the primary area of focus is nothing more than dark shadow, try this. Use the white reflector to bounce light back into the model's face to reduce the dark shadow area. You can move from side to side with the reflector to find the right spot for the fill. Another trick would be to use these reflectors in conjunction with your portable strobe, your flash. Your flash has about the same color temperature as the sun on a summer day, around 5,500 degrees Kelvin. The perfect choice to fill in the dark shadows and work as good catch lights to highlight her eyes. If you find yourself in the opposite situation, too much frontal light, try the black reflector or subtractor. As we get further into the on-assignment portion of our program, we'll explore other options with these techniques. Again, remember, these techniques apply to indoor situations as well. Before we move on to lighting for the indoor and outdoor shoots, let's take a moment and touch upon the different accessories you might want to have. Of course, the motor drive or power winder makes sure that you'll capture that perfect moment. Filter and filter holders, and lens hoods and shades. Flare can easily ruin otherwise good pictures, especially when you're shooting into the sun. When you shoot at slower shutter speeds, a good solid tripod is a must. For the care and maintenance of your equipment, a few items should always be at your side. Blower brush, canned air, and lens tissue. Now that you have your camera bag in order, let's move on to lighting options and what you might need and how to get the most out of your gear or the natural setting. And more importantly, how to get that image you're after. I think the best place to start will be indoor photography. In this segment, we'll touch upon each variation, from natural indoor lighting to the much more controlled studio setting. First, natural and available light. One of the most important elements, or disciplines if you will, in indoor photography is learning how to utilize light provided by Mother Nature. Nothing can duplicate the delicate and subtle qualities of natural sunlight. Because it is unpredictable, natural light can be difficult to control. However, when properly manipulated, it will lend a definite realism and charm to your imagery. Both very important elements in mastering glamour photography. Working with daylight has its problems, and that's mainly assessing the best time to shoot to create the photograph you're trying for. But on the other hand, you will frequently find that you're able to build up a closer, more intimate working relationship with your model than is possible on location or out of doors. The ideal indoor natural light situation would be under a traditional skylight. This gives off a large, direct source of soft light without harsh shadows or unwanted contrasts. If this is not available to you, concentrate on the use of a large window or an open door. Once again, here's the key. Before you begin a session, study where and how the light falls at different times of day. From your findings, you'll understand the best locations from which to take your picture. This will speed up your session and allow you to concentrate on the creative aspect of the photo shoot. Remember, photographs taken with available light are usually designed to create a mood or specific atmosphere. Also, you'll find that in most rooms, there will be a general localized pools of light around lamps and windows. Be careful because this situation may cause multiple shadows and high contrast. In these cases, you can use your reflectors to improve the natural light setting. Place the reflectors in direct line with the light source and at right angles to the point of where you want the light to fall. Though you may not realize it, the textures and amenities in the room you're shooting in will be helping to reduce contrast naturally, like furniture, walls, fabrics. Be sure to use everything available to you in creating the image you're after. This is where your imagination pays off. As you realize, the studio is a much more controlled environment. Every aspect is up to you. Lighting, vast amounts of equipment, and of course set design and construction. Let's talk about the equipment available to you for lighting in the studio. Then we'll move on to some basic lighting techniques used in glamour photography. The lighting and equipment allowances are only as detailed as you make them. However, there are few items that will make studio work much easier, like background rolls. These rolls of very thick paper are available in many sizes and colors. Another useful item will be a small step ladder, which makes it easier to achieve the high-angle shot. And a good selection of reflectors, much like the outdoor complement, will be mandatory. Other items that you find that you need can be added as you go, but there's no rush. Now let's discuss lighting equipment. Although professional photographers almost always use electronic flash, tungsten floods are still largely used by amateurs, since they are much less expensive. If you're using photo flood lighting now, you may want to eventually move into the electronic strobe lighting. Of course, these units are much more expensive, but worth every penny. With quartz halogen, the light lasts 10 times longer than that of photo floods, and the light and color output remain the same. There are many reasons for the use of electronic flash by professionals, but one of the most important is the color quality closely approaches that of daylight, and therefore daylight balanced film can be used. If you plan to use Studio Flash, an instant flash meter is essential. You use this type of unit by aiming it at the light source, and when the lamp is fired, the meter will record on a memory circuit the light level. With any form of lighting, you will need stands. A basic tripod-like design is used for most all types of lighting instruments. Check your local photo shop for the right size and height for your lights. Now back to reflectors and diffusers. As I've mentioned before, these items are essential in all forms of photography, especially in the controlled environment of the studio. Attachments such as snoots and barn doors are pieces of equipment that will help you control spotlights and floods. Their general purpose is to direct the light or cut it from the areas you don't want it to fall on, like camera lenses or large reflective surfaces that could influence your exposure. Diffusers, as the name implies, are items that are used to soften or diffuse a light source. There are two types of diffusion. Basically, one form of diffusion is to reflect light into an altered surface to get the desired results. The other form of diffusion is to attach an instrument directly to the light source. With reflective attachments, there are several options. The most popular are umbrellas. A white finish like this will throw a soft light, creating soft shadows as well. A gold finish will cast a warm glow. A silver finish will actually increase the light's intensity and at the same time produce harder shadows. One of the most used techniques is bounce lighting. You'll find that this is the next best thing to natural light. If this technique is used skillfully, it's barely possible to tell the difference between the two in the end photograph. The trick is to direct your light into a white surface. Ideally, this would be, as in this case, an umbrella. This bounce light source can now be moved about the set for proper position. Remember, if you don't have access to an umbrella, a sheet of white foam core, a large white sheet, or just a nearby white wall will do the trick as well. Begin by positioning this fill light just left of the camera so you can achieve the basic exposure level you're after. Next, try directing one main light source, or the key light, towards the model. Adjust the position and the strength of the key until you're satisfied with the overall effect. Remember that you don't want the two lights you've just positioned to be falling with the same intensity on your model. This would cause flat overall illumination, which is never flattering to the model. To best emphasize shape, features, and textures, you must create shadows and highlights. To complete this very basic design, try placing a small spotlight behind your subject so as to separate her from the background and highlight her hairline. This basic style of lighting design is sometimes referred to as triangle light. In the classic sense of this approach, the lighting ratio would be 2:1. That is, the intensity of the light falling on the model from the key light is twice that of the bounce or fill light. Experiment with higher ratios to get the image you're after. As a general rule of thumb, the more glamorous and dramatic photographs exhibit a higher lighting ratio. Keep in mind that these are just basic parameters to get you started. As you begin to design your own style, you'll be able to employ many different techniques that will become your working base. I can't stress enough that when you shoot within the studio, you have ultimate control. It's up to you to make sure that the mood of the model, the location, and the mood of the lighting all work in perfect harmony to create the image you've seen in your mind. That's glamour photography, and the essence of all creative arts. Since the basis of all photography is light, let's begin by talking a little bit about the color temperature of light. The color of light undergoes enormous changes throughout the day. These changes have a profound effect on the atmosphere and on the images rendered on your film. The natural changes in light can be used to great advantages. You should make a habit of exploiting the natural light, not fighting it. At sunrise, the color temperature is about 2,000 to 3,000 degrees Kelvin, a warm pink or yellow, depending on the strength of the sun. The color temperature rises during the day, reaching a peak at noon and in the early afternoon. Towards evening, it falls again, often producing a rich red color cast at sunset. Just a little bit more. Oh, that's just great, Kelly. Super. Take 5. It's important to become familiar with the characteristics of color throughout the day so you can best plan your session. The best time of day depends on which kind of effects you're looking for. Learning to use the sun as a key light and the flash unit on your camera as the fill light is the first situation we'll discuss. In an outdoor setting like this, you've probably heard as a youngster growing up to keep the sun behind you as you snap the family photos. Well, that's almost true, but flat, direct light is the most unflattering lighting scheme you can pick. Contour, shape, and form are defined by light and shadow. If you find that you need to reduce the key, try changing the position of your model just a bit to reduce the intensity of the light. Now try roughing in a backlight. In an outdoor setup, this will be a reflector placed behind your model, just out of camera's view. However, to keep the setting very natural, your backlighting effect should be kept to a minimum. Remember, although you're manipulating the natural resource here, you should be aware that constantly the best images are those where all the elements are in harmony: light, makeup, pose, and setting. So make sure that your bounce and reflective light or flash are not too obtrusive. Well, now that you have a good backlight placed and your model positioned properly for the key light, I'll let you in on a little secret about using your flash as a fill light source. As you may have known before, and as we've mentioned before in this program, the electronic flash unit is widely used for fill purposes. One simple trick that'll make the difference between a fabricated outdoor photo and a very natural, warm, and enchanting image is to reduce the output of the flash unit to about half of what it tells you to. This will keep the flash unit from dominating the image and will preserve the natural feeling of the setting. I want to mention that some of the very best shots are taken without strong directional sunlight. Kelly, right over here. Great, super. Oftentimes, being in the shade of foliage or shooting under cloudy skies offer a natural diffusion to the light that one can't get any other way. Also in these cases, your flash can act as the key light to add contour and contrast not allowed with overcast skies. As I've said many times throughout this program, the image of glamour is in the eye of the beholder. If you're able to create the image you want using these techniques or other ones you develop on your own, then you're on your way to becoming a successful photographer. Of course, all the lighting techniques we've talked about in the outdoor and indoor segments of this show will help you in any photo shoot you undertake. Another learning tool will be for you to analyze other photographers' work. Try to figure out how they achieved a particular effect, but the best advice is to practice, practice, practice.